Hi, it's Katrina! From secret communities to mythical beasts found, here are 8 mysterious swamp discoveries. Number 8. The Swamp Ghost. In this case, I don't mean an actual ghost. Papua New Guinea is known among war history buffs as the resting place of many wartime machines, including submarines, troopships, and aircraft. Perhaps the most famous among them is a Boeing B-17E Flying Fortress known as the Swamp Ghost, a World War II-era aircraft that was assigned to the 22nd Bomb Squadron of the 7th Bombardment Group in Northern Australia and under the command of the U.S. Navy. During the war, the Australian base at Rabaul in Papua New Guinea was seized by the Japanese Imperial Navy. At midnight on February 22, 1942, 6 B-17Es took off from Honolulu with plans to strike at the invasion fleet. The plane that would eventually become known as the Swamp Ghost was piloted by Fred Eaton. During Eaton's first run over the target, the plane's bomb bay doors got stuck. The fighter was subsequently swarmed by fighter jets as anti-aircraft fire punctured the wing fuel tank. As Eaton piloted the plane toward Port Moresby on the other side of Papua New Guinea, it ran out of fuel. Eaton landed the plane about 8 miles inland on the northern coast in the Istanbuls Swamp, which he had mistaken for a flat green field. For the next 64 years, the plane laid there undisturbed in 5 feet of thick grass and swamp water. It was dubbed the Swamp Ghost by Australian Army pilots who glimpsed it from overhead. In May 2006, the Swamp Ghost was located and removed by a crew led by aviation enthusiast Alfred Hagen. It was disassembled in the swamp piece by piece and flown out by helicopter. Controversy ensued, preventing the decaying plane from leaving Papua New Guinea. The recovery of the Swamp Ghost raised important questions about how to properly handle war surplus, including who has a right to take it and sell it. For the next 4 years, the Swamp Ghost remained in a warehouse until the government approved its exportation. It was then returned to Hawaii and is housed at the Pacific Aviation Museum, Pearl Harbor in Honolulu. Has anyone been there to see it? Let me know in the comments below. Number 7. Hidden Fugitive Community. Today, the Great Dismal Swamp is a National Wildlife Refuge in North Carolina and Virginia. Just the name alone sounds spooky. Once upon a time, however, the swamp was home to a series of hidden communities, mostly of people seeking refuge from the colonial frontier. The swamp's vegetation was too thick for horses or canoes, making it an ideal place for avoiding invasive imperialist forces. Native Americans took to the swamps here during the 1600s and were soon joined by runaway slaves, as well as white people who were avoiding the law or escaping indentured servitude. These communities lasted until around the end of the Civil War, and it was no easy feat. Because the swamp's conditions were so challenging, no archaeological exploration occurred until the early 2000s, when Dan Sayers, a historical anthropologist and the chair of the anthropology department at American University in Washington, D.C., decided to investigate. In fact, before then, one research team gave up because they kept getting lost. Jungles and swamps are quite the challenge, and there is a reason people went there to escape. Sayers discovered the remains of cabins, weapons, pipes, and tool fragments on a 20-acre island that he simply referred to as a nameless site. In a September 2016 interview with Richard Grant of Smithsonian Magazine, Sayers explained the site's fascinating historical value, stating these people performed a critique of a brutal capitalistic enslavement system, and they rejected it completely. They risked everything to live in a more just and equitable way, and they were successful for 10 generations. As the free African American communities grew in the safety of the swamp, they were able to maintain their culture and had the same values and traditions as those found in an African village. The process of extricating oneself from slavery was known as marriage and occurred in various parts of the world, including the Caribbean, Latin America, various parts of Africa, and certain islands of the Indian Ocean. Until Sayers' discovery, however, most historians rejected the idea that marriage had been practiced in North America. In his opinion, this downplaying and denial represents the valorization of white involvement in the Underground Railroad, as well as a failure to acknowledge the strength of Black resistance and initiative. Number 6. The Windover Cemetery. In 1982, during construction for a new housing development in Florida, a backhoe operator discovered bones sticking out of the ground at the site of a small peat-bottom pond. It didn't look good, so they called the police. Turns out there were some 168 bodies stuck in the pond. Good news is, police determined the skeletons were not recent. Then they contacted archaeologists at Florida State University. The developer allowed the archaeologists to excavate the site, and in 1984, the digging began under the leadership of FSU archaeologist Glenn Doran, courtesy of funding provided by the Florida legislature. Although the prehistoric remains were reduced to skeletons with no remaining skin, they were extremely well preserved, and over half of them contained brains, for those of you who love gory details. Other items were found at the site, including bone tools, a bottle gourd, and woven fabric shrouds. These artifacts were carbon dated to somewhere around 6,280 BC, over 3,500 years before the construction of the Great Pyramids. They offer a rare glimpse into daily life at an ancient hunter-gatherer-fisher community. The 8,000-year-old site revealed by its sheer amount of burials that the society that lived there wasn't constantly on the move. This was likely due to the rich ecosystem of the surrounding environment, which enabled people to stay put for a while and offered bountiful resources. There were over 30 species of trees, as well as over 30 varieties of edible and medicinal plants. Very few of the bodies showed signs of a violent demise, indicating that Windover was a community cemetery rather than a dumping ground for disgraced criminals. While many people died during their 20s, some lived into their 70s. Surprisingly, there were finely woven cloths at the site, dispelling the misconceptions you may have had about ancient people wearing nothing more than crude animal skins. No biological affiliation between modern Native American groups and these ancient Floridians has been discovered thus far. The site is considered one of the most important burial sites throughout North America, as well as the most significant burial complex on the continent. Number 5. The Bridge Battle. Around 3,200 years ago, a major battle occurred between two armies at a river crossing near the Baltic Sea. The brutal struggle was carried out in as little as one day between thousands of soldiers wielding wooden, flint, and bronze weapons. They fought hand-to-hand on the marshy banks of the Talence River, located in northern Germany, using clubs, spears, swords, and knives. When all was said and done, the swampy valley was littered with hundreds of bodies. While some sank beneath a meter or two of water, affording them some protection from plundering, others were left bobbing in shallow ponds and were stripped of valuables. The entire battle was forgotten within centuries as peat slowly settled over the skeletons. History books bear no evidence of the confrontation, as the written word did not become common in that part of the world for another 2,000 years or so. An amateur archaeologist discovered the first clue of the Talence Valley's gruesome Bronze Age battle in 1996 in the form of an upper arm bone sticking out of the steep riverbank. Subsequent excavations uncovered the remains of over 100 men and 5 horses, as well as wooden clubs, bronze spearheads, and flint and bronze arrowheads. It's possible that the remains of hundreds more remain unexcavated, and that thousands of soldiers survived the battle, indicating the possibility that the conflict was of a scale previously unknown to the north of the Alps. Moreover, the decayed warriors and weapons may be the earliest direct evidence of a battle of such large proportions anywhere in the ancient world. Number 4. Istanbuls Real Age. Until 2009, modern historians generally believed that modern-day Istanbul was first settled around 700 BC. In 2009, however, scientists announced the discovery of a Neolithic grave at the site of a 21st century rail project, suggesting that Istanbul's roots go back much further than originally thought. The grave contained the curled-up skeletal remains of 2 adults and 2 children, surrounded by pots intended to hold gifts for use in the afterlife. Although Neolithic grave sites had previously been discovered in Istanbul suburbs during the 50s and the 80s, this was the first to be found in the historic heart of the city. Then head of the Istanbul Archaeology Museum, Ismail Karamut, who led the dig, described the other findings, stating there were signs of houses made of tree branches, and next to the settlement was a swamp where we found small tools, wooden pieces, and bones. Further adding, it all shows there was a Neolithic settlement here in the historic peninsula of Istanbul where people lived, farmed, and fished. The Neolithic era began to the east of Istanbul and was marked by the abandonment of a nomadic hunting lifestyle for agriculture and more permanent settlements. The excavation of the site was originally planned to take 6 months, but lasted from 2004 to 2013, and has turned out to be one of the world's largest archaeological digs. Over 8,000 years of the city's history was uncovered by hundreds of laborers and archaeologists of the Istanbul Archaeological Museums. The team discovered the city's first walls, believed to date back to Constantine I. They also found the remains of a major 4th century port, which was once the busiest in Byzantium. The port contained the remains of over 30 wooden ships thought to have wrecked in the 10th and 11th centuries during storms. In light of these major discoveries, Professor Mehmet Özdogan reminded the Turkish government that the experience should be a lesson for the authorities, who had failed to facilitate archaeological digs for purely scientific purposes since the 1960s. Number 3. Creepy dolls. The Autauga County Sheriff's Office in Alabama was especially busy on Halloween night of 2014 when they received various calls reporting sightings of strange dolls in Bear Creek Swamp near County Road 3. For unknown reasons, about 24 dolls of different sizes and in varying states of dress had been attached to sticks and stuck into the ground. The Sheriff's Office appealed to the public for information after being contacted by concerned citizens. In 2013, the year before the creepy dolls appeared, Bear Creek Swamp was featured on an episode of Deep South Paranormal, a sci-fi channel series. Nobody seemed to know much, however, and according to the most recent available update, the origin of the dolls remains a mystery. Strange? Definitely. Harmless Halloween prank? Most likely. Number 2. The Reticulated Siren. The giant salamander known as the Reticulated Siren was largely considered a mythical beast. That is, until last year. Known locally as a leopard eel, the reticulated siren dwells in the shallow freshwater marshes of Alabama and Florida, but is rarely seen and until recently was never studied by herpetologists. The reticulated siren was described, classified, and named as a salamander species for the first time in a December 2018 study conducted by researchers from Sul Ross State University in Alpine, Texas, and the Georgia Sea Turtle Center on Jekyll Island, Georgia. Hey, my parents just moved near there. This strange spotted creature has a slimy body about 2 feet long, no forelegs, 2 back legs, and gills behind its head that fan out like leaves. It's the largest salamander species discovered in the U.S. in the last 100 years. Scientists hope that classifying the creature and confirming its existence will inspire some much-needed further study about the elusive species. Additional research will be difficult, however, given the reticulated siren's seemingly sparse presence. Decades-old rumors of the species' existence were finally confirmed in 2009, when scientists who were looking for sea turtles accidentally stumbled upon one. Classification efforts began in earnest more than 5 years later, after scientists managed to capture 2 more of the animals. Number 1. An ancient tree. Scientists recently announced the discovery of a 2,624-year-old bald cypress tree in North Carolina's Black River swampland. The findings, which were published in the May 9th issue of the journal Environmental Research Communications, were compiled by scientists who were studying tree rings in an effort to piece together the climate history of the eastern United States. The scientists knew, based on previous research, that one of the country's oldest tree clusters exists within the Black River's Three Sisters Swamp. This earlier fieldwork determined the age of several bald cypress trees in that particular cluster to be between 1,000 and 1,650 years old. According to their research, the recently discovered 2,624-year-old bald cypress is one of the oldest non-clonal sexually reproducing trees in the world. Clonal trees can live to be tens of thousands of years old and are derived from vast colonies of genetically identical plants that grow from a single ancestor, but this is not one of them. Within the same swamp, the researchers also found a 2,088-year-old cypress tree, and they predict that more trees of a similar age will be found in that area. The recent study determined that the bald cypress is the oldest known wetland tree species on Earth. It's older than Christianity, the English language, and the Roman Empire. Thanks for watching! Would you like to learn more about strange swamp discoveries? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe and I'll see you soon. Bye!